Hey everyone, welcome to the 282nd episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And we have a very fun show for you this week. We're going to be talking to George Yanni, who is the inventor, or one of the inventors, of the Philips Hue lights, and is still the head of technology over there. Plus, in our news segment, we're going to be talking about a new release from the Bluetooth SIG to help with contact tracing. The Z-Wave Alliance is shaking things up. Verizon, I feel like it's given up the ghost on its IoT platform. We'll talk about that. And what killed Project Sidewalk on K-Side? So this is the Toronto waterfront project that was with Alphabet, Google's parent company. We'll go into that. Plus, you may not need a breathalyzer in the future, and it's a little scary. We also have a new risk vulnerability. Smart displays are getting Zoom. Google's got some updates for Nest. And we're going to cover some efforts to make disaster response faster and smarter using AI. Kevin's also going to share a little bit about his thoughts on projectors in the smart home. And we're also going to hear from our sponsor, Very. All of this and more is coming to you on this episode. So let's get it started with a message from another one of our sponsors. This week's sponsor is Silicon Labs, and we're talking about the Works With conference. This is a free virtual smart home developer conference. It's going to be happening September 9th through 10th, and engineers from Amazon, Google, Samsung, and more are going to lead hands-on workshops, technical training, and educational panels to train engineers and developers on how to design products that work with all the smart home ecosystems or wireless protocols. I also am participating in this event. I am going to be hosting a panel at Works With on Project Chip. So hopefully we're going to learn more details about what that's about. That's going to be on September 9th. And help me ask the tough questions, and we're going to try to get them answered. So register today for Works With by Silicon Labs and bring your teammates. You can do this at workswith.scilabs.com. I am really excited about that chip panel / nervous. I'm like, are they going to finally tell us something? Kevin, I don't know.
No, don't be nervous. I'm dying to hear some details on where they're headed with all this and the progress that they hopefully have been making.
Yes, and I'll give you guys a tip. If you listen to George Yanni later on in the show, he talks about chip, believe it or not.
Ooh.
You should believe it. I mean, it's Philips Hue. Of course they're thinking about this, right?
If you say it, I believe it.
There we go. All right, let's talk about Bluetooth. So we've talked about contact tracing, and Apple and Google put forth a framework for using Bluetooth on their devices for contact tracing. And they really tried hard to make it very privacy focused. And I think they actually did a decent job in that respect. I think the challenges are many, one of which being for contact tracing to work, you really need to have a lot of people to adopt it and use the apps. So far, there are, 5 states now that have...
Yeah, last we checked, it was 5. My state of Pennsylvania will be joining them in the next few months, I just heard yesterday.
Okay, so when they have the app, are you going to download it?
Oh, definitely. Just because that's what I do. I'll definitely see how it works and try to get results. I mean, hopefully I don't get COVID, but I'm curious to see how it works.
Got it. So that's one of the struggles, is getting people to download it. Not everybody's like Kevin. And another struggle is there are a lot of people who don't have smartphones, but also might get COVID, like children or older adults who might not carry smartphones like Apple or higher end Apple or Android phones. And to solve that problem, the Bluetooth SIG has come out with a working group. So there's 130 of its members who are now involved in this working group to let peripheral Bluetooth devices act as a contact tracing device. So what it would be is I, as like a parent, I might give my child a Fitbit or another wearable, and I would attach that device to my smartphone account. And then all of the contact tracing benefits, like if they run into someone with COVID, it would track it on that device. It would send the information to my phone when they got back into my range, and I could see, right? Share that data.
And this makes total sense because, I mean, there probably are a few niche examples, but just about every wearable has some type of connectivity to get the data from it to your phone. And typically Bluetooth is the standard for that, because we're not talking about gobs of data. We're not talking about needing a fast connection. We're talking about a direct one device to another, transfer of data. So that makes sense. And I think the kids, that segment is a great segment that's going to work for. I'm still not sure about the older population, because if they don't have a smartphone, I'm betting they probably don't have a wearable device with Bluetooth either. But this is still a good idea.
Yeah, and maybe there's like a special wearable device that will be marketed to them for this. And the Bluetooth SIG says the working group is established and they're going to be pushing something out in the next few months. So all of these things, we're talking about them like they exist, but they don't, and they won't for another few months. So for now, we're doing contact tracing the old-fashioned way, or we're not doing it at all, depending on where you are in the country. And, that has pretty big implications. I also am excited about this. I don't know if it will help, but you know me, I don't carry my smartphone everywhere I go. And I'm kind of excited about the idea of the Bluetooth SIG and its member companies paying more attention to these peripheral devices as a way to indicate something, right? As a device that could do more. I'm thinking about specifically presence detection in the smart home. So I don't know.
I am not going to argue with you on that, because I've said if I've got a watch, for example, that's always on me, that's perfect for presence detection. And I've got the Bluetooth in there. And yes, I have other radios as well, but oh yeah, I'm all for that.
So we'll see. They're not saying that that's what they're doing, but I have hopes. All right. The Z-Wave Alliance. For those of y'all who are like, Z-Wave what? Z-Wave is one of the smart home protocols that are out there for devices to communicate within the home. It is a mesh network. It is designed for low power sensors. It's very popular in security alarms, and it competes with things like Zigbee, or some people would say Bluetooth mesh. I don't think so, because it's a better technology than Bluetooth mesh still for something like that. So the Z-Wave Alliance is now an officially independent entity, and it's a nonprofit. So it's got new working groups. It's got a new membership structure for people working on the Z-Wave spec. And the organization now is similar to something like Wi-Fi and USB. Prior to this, it sounded like a standards organization, but really what it was owned by Sigma Designs. That was acquired by Silicon Labs. And Silicon Labs for a while was the only person who provided Z-Wave chips. And that made a lot of people uncomfortable when it came to adopting Z-Wave, because they didn't want to have a chip provider holding them over the barrel, right? So that made it hard to argue that it was truly an open standard. But now the organization is truly an official standards organization. Z-Wave is going to become a ratified multi-source wireless standard that will be available to anybody who wants to make it. So any chip vendor out there can now make it. And the new standard organization has 7 founding members. They are Alarm.com, Assa Abloy, which makes the Yale locks and owns the August locks, Lidarson, which is a lighting company, Ring, Silicon Labs, Stratus, which is a smart apartments company, and Qualsys, which makes security devices. So that's what's happening with Z-Wave. It's a big deal, but I'm not sure if it's too late for the standard. I just talked to somebody from Alarm.com recently, and they are still all in on Z-Wave. So maybe it's just going to be a niche.
And it's funny you say that, because I was thinking about the Zigbee Alliance and chip, and how Z-Wave is not really there, not involved.
Yes, and it feels like chip is the future, right?
It feels like it.
Okay, yeah, we'll see. I mean, they still have to put out a cert, right? So yeah, this was worth noting, especially for everybody in the smart home space. I don't know about you, Kevin, but I have tons of Z-Wave gear running around. What isn't in here and what should be in here is a company like Samsung, which makes the SmartThings Hub, or a company like Wink, which makes the Wink Hub, and those all work with Z-Wave sensors right now.
This almost feels like a defensive thing to raise awareness of Z-Wave in light of all the chip talk.
They've been working on it for a long time. This isn't just a chip-related thing, because that's been the biggest mark against them for almost a decade. Anyway, let's go back a decade. Actually, it's not even a decade. Let's go back 7 years or so to the era of IoT platforms. Way back when we started covering all this stuff, it seemed like every day a new company launched, and they were like, we are a complete end-to-end IoT platform. We'll give you a board, we'll give you the connectivity, we'll link you to our cloud, and we've got an app and a website where you can do things with it. And that was very cool. Tons of those out there. And they've been gradually going away if they haven't succeeded. And a lot of them didn't succeed, because there were, like, at one count, there were almost 700 of them. It was ridiculous. So one of those was called Thingspace. So Verizon bought that and brought it in and created its own IoT platform. That didn't last for that long. And back in 2019, so last summer, Verizon was like, All right, we're done with this whole cloud thing because it's clearly not working. People go to Microsoft and they go to AWS for their IoT cloud services. And so Verizon revamped Thingspace and said, hey, it's going to be all connectivity all the time. And people were like, okay, who cares? Now, this week, it said, you know what? It's even less than that. So they announced the Thingspace Marketplace, which is basically Verizon selling SIM cards for IoT, plans for IoT, and a couple sensors that are integrated with their connectivity in them. So basically now it's just a shopping site.
Not a well-designed one either.
Yeah, Kevin's upset with this. I don't know if you want to complain.
I'll explain. I mean, I know I'm being nitpicky and cranky, but just the connectivity plans, there are 6 of them, and each one has its own card on the website, taking up a ton of space. And the only difference in them, aside from the price, is the amount of bandwidth that you could use in a given month. So there's a 1 meg plan, there's a 10 meg plan, 100 meg, all the way up to 10 gig. Everything else is the same. I'm like, why are you taking up an entire screen? Just put some line items and here you go, here's what you get. Because everything else in the plans is the same. X number of SMSs, X number of location updates, software management, diagnostics, etc. I'm like, come on. Sorry, I'm done.
And this was Kevin's Cranky Corner. All right, let's go to Stacy's Cranky Corner and talk about privacy. Brian J. Barth over at 10, it is a Medium magazine on technology, wrote a deep dive into what happened with Sidewalk Labs and Waterfront Toronto. And this was Toronto's Quayside project, and Alphabet came in with Sidewalk Labs and said, we're going to do a smart city. It's going to be awesome. And people did not go for it. They launched it with a lot of fanfare. And then very quickly, we started to see a backlash to it. And the backlash was mostly around data collection, data ownership, and then citizen privacy. And would this be a surveillance kind of era? And a lot of people agreed. They were like, we don't want this. We don't feel like there was enough oversight in setting this up. We're very concerned about our data. We're very concerned about how Sidewalk Labs is going to use it and sell it. Businesses got involved because they didn't like the idea of Google being a monopoly with access to that data. So I had Bianca Wiley probably a year and a half ago on the podcast talking about some of this. She was one of the people who was leading the charge against it. I read this with interest, and early on in the pandemic, Alphabet said, you know what, we're pulling out. Sidewalk Labs is not doing Quayside at Waterfront Toronto anymore. And everyone's like, yay, a victory for privacy. The story really covers all of that, but it's the very end of the story that kind of, I was like, aha. Dan Doctoroff, who was the CEO at Sidewalk Labs, like a week after they announced Sidewalk Labs' withdrawal from Toronto, he was at a panel where he talked about the post-COVID-19 future of smart cities. And it sounds like nothing has changed. And he says that many cities are out there really wanting something like this. So I worry, and we've talked about this on the show, that with things like contact tracing and some of the temperature sensing and some of the things we're putting in offices for tracking employee movements, just to make sure they're not getting too close to people, and also checking for like occupancy levels, there's a lot of concern that we're going to implement all of this in a big rush to protect against the pandemic, but we're not going to pull it back. And then we're going to have a much greater surveillance state. It sounds like Sidewalk Labs is prepared to use this data, and I don't know how I feel about that.
I think if anything can be learned from the whole project, it has to do with getting buy-in and feedback from the people who will live and work and walk through this area before making grand announcements and committing money and awarding contracts and all that. It seems to me like so much of this feedback cycle happened after the fact. And that's like saying, I am going to offer a smart home service on houses that I build. I'm going to build all the smarts in, all the data collection. And then after somebody has bought it, I'm going to explain to them, okay, so now here's how I'm using the data. Here's what I'm going to get and everything else. Isn't this wonderful? It's too private of an environment to do that kind of feedback cycle after the fact.
Speaking of privacy, similar and also kind of one of the worries of the Sidewalk Labs people was like, there's a lot of data here and we don't know how it will be used. So keep that in your mind, because this next story is based on a study published in the Journal of Studies on Alcohol and Drugs. It is researchers from Stanford University have figured out an algorithm that can tell if you're drunk based on data from your smartphone's accelerometer.
I like this idea. I think it'd actually be easier to scan somebody's text messages while they're drinking, because then you can easily tell they're drunk, but that's a whole separate issue.
I should say, I misspoke. There is a researcher from Stanford University, but there is also researchers at the University of Pittsburgh, close to you, Kevin. Okay, so it's a small sample size. It was only 22 adults, but they basically determined that, yes, you could tell when people's movements deteriorated to the point that they were at a 0.08 level of alcohol in their blood. And they did it with a 90% accuracy.
I'd like to see a bigger study, and I'm okay with this. I mean, if it can save lives, it's not something I have to monitor myself or take a breathalyzer test to see if I should be driving. I kind of like it. It should be opt-in, but I kind of like it.
Maybe if it's opt-in, I download this app. My husband actually had a breathalyzer for the longest time, and he bought it partially on a whim, but this was in college, and he used to give people breath tests for fun, and he would also do his own when he had gone out drinking. Also for fun. He didn't want to drive. He just wanted to see how much alcohol he had drunk, because that's what nerds do in college, I guess. My issue here is, what if that sort of algorithm can be applied to data and police can subpoena it? Let's say I refuse to take a breathalyzer test and I go in, and then they're like, okay, fine. Don't take the breathalyzer. We'll subpoena Google or Apple for your smartphone data, and we'll just run this algorithm against it and see. That feels like a problem.
It's more invasive, yes. I don't know how to handle that from a legal standpoint. I presume they could subpoena it. I do not know. So I get it.
I really want people to think very carefully, because as we embed sensors in all of these places, we're opening ourselves up to this. And then there's also the idea, this is a small sample study, but how accurate is it? And what if you send someone to jail or fine them incredible amounts of money based on this information, and they fall in the 10% group where it doesn't affect them? Or what if you rely on this and you're able to walk really well when you're drunk? All of this feels just a little too...
If there was a way to have that data stay within the app, localized to the phone, so it's not sent to the cloud. Granted, again, it may still be able to be subpoenaed, but at least you cut out that data being completely out of your control because it's not in the cloud, number one.
That's true. If they erase it every day, let's say they erase it every day, then I feel better. I want to see it be a little bit more accurate just in case.
Maybe it doesn't store the data at all. It's just an instant reading, and that's that. Geeks might want to do these kind of tests, but are you going to create an Excel chart to show when you drunk the most this month? I don't think so.
I don't know why you would.
Somebody might, and that's okay. And the other thing I would say is, even if that data is available for law enforcement through a subpoena process, I would not want to see laws where, okay, well, you're getting a DUI because of this data. It shouldn't be considered acceptable to charge somebody, right? It's more of an indicator as opposed to a breathalyzer.
Okay, let's move from privacy to security. IBM has a group of hackers called X-Force Red, which is the most hacker name I can think of at this moment in time. So these folks have discovered a new IoT vulnerability, which can be exploited remotely, which means, yikes, that's actually pretty bad because you could do it anywhere in the world and you don't need physical access. This is an exploit of devices made by TELUS. That is not TELUS, the Canadian operator. That is TELUS, THALES, the company that owns Gemalto. It makes security chips. This particular vulnerability is in a former Gemalto module, and it's used in lots of IoT devices. It was the Centurion EHS8 M2M module, if you've got some serial numbers you want to look at, and it might affect other modules. These are devices that are in hospital equipment, some industrial manufacturing stuff. It's in smart meters, and the basic details of the vulnerability are you can basically hack any Java application on these modules, bypass it, and get control at the lowest level, which allows the attacker to control the module itself. And they can actually control it at the command interface, which is a problem. They can group them, they can communicate with others, they can write software. It allows full read, write, and delete access to the secure area. So TELUS is updating those modules, and it's a pretty big one, actually.
This is not a consumer devicey kind of chip. I mean, as you said, it's maybe in smart meters and things like that, because aside from the embedded Java, it also has a 3G radio for its connectivity. So these days, most people, I would think, have devices that have 4G, LTE, et cetera. So I wouldn't panic as a person who owns many devices, but still, this is huge.
Yeah. And what you do, you must apply your patch. So patch, patch, patch. And also, this is always good advice. Think about what you store and where you store it. And I would add how long you store it. Don't store what you don't need from a data perspective.
The good thing is this chip does support, I'm presuming they'll be able to use this, it does support firmware updates over the air. So from a patch standpoint, that makes life a lot easier, presuming that the hack doesn't disable that, for example, which in theory, somebody who knows what they're doing could probably do if they've got total control.
Okay. More quick news. Your smart displays are getting Zoom. I've had so many people call into the hotline and they're like, how can I get my Nest display to take Zoom calls? And I had no good answer for them because the answer was, you cannot.
But now you can.
Ta-da!
Google Nest, Amazon Echo, and Facebook Portal smart displays will support Zoom according to the company. I guess that $600 or $700 standalone Zoom terminal they were trying to sell isn't really going anywhere.
Well, maybe you do that and you have the other thing. There's markets for all kinds of teleconferencing in your home.
Not for me.
Speaking of Google, their Nest integration continues. Now you can see your Nest security devices, like your smart door lock and whatnot, inside your inside your Google Home app. Look at me screwing this up.
Well, it is confusing in your defense. We've had this whole transition from Nest accounts to Google accounts late last year. And everybody's like, why do I need this? Well, this is why you need it, because all of these Nest devices and services are getting integrated into the Google Home app. So yes, I don't think it's rolled out widespread yet, but some people have been showing images of, say, their Nest security devices in the Google Home app. So there's a small rollout. And then Google actually has a promo video called the Nest Door Bouncer, basically showing how this is going to work. They've got some comedians in it. It's quite funny. So
yay! All right. Other news. Microsoft, the Department of Energy, and other companies are developing new disaster response tools using AI. Kevin, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, and the timing is good because it seems like there's more hurricanes, more wildfires, more earthquakes, etc. every day. So in light of that, what Microsoft is doing, it is providing Azure Cloud for AI model training and inference on these types of events. And right now they have two systems in the early staging. This is all just getting started. It's not like they're flipping a switch here. Basically, they have one system being tested to map and predict fire lines and a similar tool for floods. So very different events, but from a data standpoint, they can be very similar. So that makes sense. So the whole idea here is to get as much useful and predictive information to first responders, because every second gathering that information or analyze that information on the human scale could be more acres of floods and fires and more people in the path of destruction. So I'm curious to see how this works out. I kind of think we should have had this before. And I know we've had types of systems like this, but I haven't seen Microsoft get involved with it from an Azure standpoint.
Well, here they are. Okay, let's talk about projectors. And we'll do this pretty quickly. But Kevin, you recently wrote something on the site about the missing ingredient in the smart home is a projector.
Well, I started thinking about this because, and I know I've said this before, I just have too many darn screens in the house. And they're great for what they do. Between the smart TVs, we have 4 of those. Smart displays practically in every room. In certain rooms, there's no cameras on those because they're more private, such as the bedroom. We've got our phones. We've got tablets all over. Our thermostats have screens now. Everything has a screen. And I'm like, no more screens. And the other thing is when you integrate smart home interactions with these screens, such as somebody rings your doorbell and on your smart TV, now you've got a video feed showing there so you can see who it is. That's a good thing. But I'm watching TV and I don't really care that there's a solicitor there right now and you've interrupted my show. And so I'm wondering if there is room for less screens or screens that sort of appear and disappear as needed, such as with Pico projectors. And there've been some advances there that I wasn't really aware of. There are projectors now that can project interfaces that are 10-finger touch or multi-touch, just like your phone, your tablet. And I'm like, wouldn't that be nice to have it built in, say, to a lamp next to my couch sitting on an end table. And when that video starts playing because somebody's at the door, it just appears there. It doesn't interrupt me. Or I want to change my smart home lights right now. I want to dim things, but I don't want to use voice because maybe everybody's sleeping. I don't want to pull out my phone. I can't find my phone. I don't want to have 6 taps. Why can't I just have that scalable interface appear where I want it? So these things are still not inexpensive, at least not the ones that I envision. But geez, the technology is improving. The costs are coming down. Maybe we have televisions with Pico projectors integrated into the top back of them, so it projects up above the TV when some event happens in the smartphone, so it's not as disruptive. I'm just thinking of that whole interface conversation we have time and time again. It was phones, then voice. We've talked about gestures. Is there space in the smart home for projectors? I think there is.
Yes. And I think the kitchen is a great place for them because you can actually interact with things on the counter. I, back in like 2013, argued that Apple really should focus on a projector interface. It sounds like they're going more with the heads-up display with glasses, but I thought projectors would be cool. I visited Frog Design back then, and they had it was a concept called Room E, and it was a combination of smart speakers and projectors that you could interact with. And I loved it. I was like, yes, I know displays do that today, but it is less visually cluttered, and I don't really want my house to look like the Jetsons. I want it to look warm and home-like, and covering these things with fabric is not enough. So I'm excited. I'm with you, Kevin. Let's see if we can, I don't know, make it happen, people. All right. Now it is that time of the show where we turn to you, our listeners, to ask your questions. That's right. It's the Iot Podcast Hotline, which is sponsored by Schlage. The biggest and best home automation adds convenience, not hassle. With its built-in Wi-Fi, the Schlage Encode's smart Wi-Fi deadbolt shows you just how easy secure can be. You can learn more at schlage.com. And you can also, if you call us with your question or comments, be entered to win a Schlage lock. I have one on my door. I actually love it. So if you want to be entered into the contest, give us a call at 512-623-7424. And that's all you have to do. You have to do it before the end of the month. Do it. All right. This week's voicemail. We don't know who you are because you didn't leave a name, but that's okay. We appreciate it that you are telling us a little hack. So let's hear his little hack.
Hey, Stacy and Kevin. Just listening to Kevin's home hack story about using the smart plug for his sump pump. And recently I had my central vac that wouldn't shut off after you unplug the hose from the wall. So decided to hack it, grabbed the smart plug, plugged the central vac into it, called it vacuum, and now I can say, hey Siri, turn on the vacuum. And I can go on my way. So saves me some money from having to have to buy a new board or buy a new vacuum altogether. Anyways, hope you guys have a great day. Thanks for the podcast. It's great. I love listening to it every week. Bye-bye.
I know most of y'all probably do not have in-home vacuum things, but way to adjust to what could have been a painful problem. I like it. So that got us thinking about smart plugs.
Which get no respect, in my opinion.
Exactly. I mean, what are we doing? We're plugging them in. We're using them to turn lights on and off. But you could do more. I have done some crazy things. Like I once plugged a television into a smart plug and tied it to my Fitbit using IFT way back in the day. If I didn't meet my step count, my television wouldn't turn on. That did not work out well for my family. I had to turn that off really quickly.
That is a brilliant little hack. I love that because it's a, reward-based system, incentive-based to make you better, healthier, et cetera. So that's awesome.
So yeah, we were thinking about like other things you could do with a smart plug that go beyond just turning on and off a light. A lot of people tell us that they have tried to use a smart plug to reset their router, but I have a lot of questions about that. If anyone's done this successfully, please share because I don't understand how you would turn it back on if your internet's off. So that's my question to anyone who's suggested that to me. Kevin, you had some ideas.
A lot of the ideas that I want to do, like I want to be able to turn on my coffee maker, for example, at a certain time or on command when I wake up, it's ready to go. The problem that I run into with all of my ideas is that the devices that I want to attach to a smart plug don't remember their power state. That's a problem. I'd like to see more smart plug capable devices, whether it's a coffee maker or whatever it might be, built in, have that power state remember because I can't do that today. So many of the ideas I have, I'm like, oh, I'd love to do this with my in-room air conditioner. Oh, no, I can't do that. Oh, I'd love to do it with the coffee maker. Oh, no, it won't work.
Right. So the fact that this guy's vacuum pump was actually broken and always on worked. That's exactly how you want these things to kind of work, or just remember it. Okay. Yeah. So I'm sure there are probably safety concerns associated with that, but I would love to learn more about this or get more insights there. Because yes, on the coffee machine thing, I'm like, oh, if I wanted to turn my coffee machine on, I would have to like get a servo and attach it so it would hit the button. And that's...
No, thank you. Yeah, I tried to make a Lego robot to do that one time, but I mean, no, it's just not the way to do it.
It's too much effort to solve a really small problem. Anyway.
But Legos are fun, so I didn't mind.
If you want to think about that, anybody in the manufacturing space want to work on understanding, or maybe the guys at Wemo want to work on understanding power state and leaving that on, I'd love it. Although then my house might catch on fire. Who knows? Okay, that is enough of the hotline. Remember, if you want to be entered to win, give us a call at 512-623-7424. And do it before midnight Eastern on August 31st, and you could win a Schleg lock. Who wouldn't love it? Okay, that concludes the news portion of the show. We're going to hear from our sponsor, Very, in a moment, but you're going to want to stay tuned to hear from George Yanni, who is the head of technology at Philips Hue, and we're talking about the end of the Philips Hue V1 hub. We're talking about Project Chip and where Hue is going next. All of this and more await you. Hey everyone, we are taking a quick break from the Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. And our sponsor this week is Very, a leading IoT engineering firm. And I have Jen Gamble, who leads the data science practice at Very, here to talk to us. So, word on the street is that building machine learning IoT products is hard.
Yes, it definitely can be. In industrial manufacturing in particular, you tend to hear a lot of buzz these days. People are using terms like Industry 4.0, smart machines, sensor data, cloud computing, machine learning. But it's very common that machine learning industrial IoT projects never make it out of the proof of concept phase. On a recent client project at Very, we used Elixir to help bridge this gap from concept to production.
Okay, so what exactly is Elixir for those of us who are not familiar?
I'll use the words of its creators. Elixir is a dynamic functional programming language designed for building scalable and maintainable applications. And so at Very, the time we use Elixir the most is when we're working with Nerve, which is an Elixir-based open source platform and infrastructure that companies can use to build, deploy, and manage IoT devices. And one great thing about Nerve is that you can have Elixir developers doing your embedded development instead of having to write everything in C or C++, for example. And it's also handy that we can use Nerve's Hub, which is the associated web service that manages firmware updates over the air.
Okay, so that's great. And on this industrial project, how did you use Elixir and Nerves?
So for this project, what we were building was a production system to go from PLC sensor data on a fleet of machines to a cloud-based application for machine monitoring and anomaly detection. The tools that we used from within the Elixir ecosystem, I already mentioned Nerves and Nerves Hub. We also used Phoenix for the backend of the web application, and we used the libraries Broadway and Ecto to build the data pipeline. The other non-Elixir components of the application included tools and resources from AWS, like IoT Core, SQS, Lambda, API Gateway, S3, and we also used Python libraries and AWS SageMaker for machine learning and React for the front end. Taking this approach was great because one of the most difficult things about building full stack IoT products is that there's such a wide diversity of skill sets required on the team. And we really like to take an agile MVP style development approach. So it can sometimes be a challenge to have the team work together tightly enough when they come from such different backgrounds. So being able to use Elixir developers for the embedded firmware development, the data pipelining, and the backend development really helps to streamline the process, as opposed to having 3 different developers using 3 different tech stacks for those components.
Wow. Okay. Sounds great. Jen, where do I go to learn more about how Very can help me with my IoT projects?
You can reach out to us at verypossible.com/Stacy. That's verypossible.com/STACUI.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is a blast from the past. It is George Yanni, who is the head of technology at Philips Hue. Hi George, how are you today?
I'm great, Stacey. Good to be here.
Excellent. So, I don't actually know if in the long time we've done the podcast that if you've ever been a guest on the show, which feels horrible if that's indeed the case. Is it the case?
Yeah, we've definitely spoken before, but I don't think I've spoken on the podcast just yet. So I'm glad you got around to me in the end.
There we go. I feel horrible. I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm super excited about this. I feel like everybody who listens knows what Philips Hue is, but let's give you a chance to explain what you're trying to do at Philips Hue.
So Philips Hue is an ecosystem of smart lights, which is really aiming to change how normal people are using lighting inside their home. We really think there's an enormous potential for lighting to help how people live their lives and make them richer and more enjoyable. If they move into smart lighting, they go beyond just turning a light bulb on and off.
And I will say that probably 50% of my time is spent turning light bulbs on and off. I feel like I'm so lame. I did get into the colored lighting. Originally, I was so excited about it for like ambient notifications. And y'all have done a lot of work with things like getting scenes, and people were excited about that. So where are you today? What are consumers actually doing with these things?
We have a few different major ways. The biggest way people get into Philips Hue initially is about home decoration. So the great thing about smart lights is they're a really easy way to, let's say, change the ambience, the feel of a room on a regular basis. So you can really personalize your own space. So people, they use our app to create their own custom light scenes with different colors around the space, or use some of the ones that we give them. And it just makes their home more of their own thing, more of their own personal decoration. That's the major way, ambience creation. The next way people really use it is about how light can help you feel better in your own home. So we do a lot of work at Philips Hue on the effect that lighting has on your body. And it's actually pretty profound. Having the right light helps you sleep, helps you concentrate, helps you read without getting tired, helps you to relax. So people really are using lighting to just help them feel better living at home. Recently, we've moved into the entertainment space, and we've launched a collection of products which let you bring the action from your TV screen or gaming computer into the entire space that you're in by having lighting react to the content on the screen all around you, putting you in the center of the action. So there's a lot of different ways in which people are using the products. I think those are the three major ones today.
Got it. And I will say I found setting up the scenes, even the ones that you guys had prepped, it was fun, but at the end of the day, it just felt like a lot of work. And I don't know how to make that easier. So I didn't know if there was a strategy around making that easier for the end consumer.
Yeah, so in the end, lighting is a pretty rich thing to control. It's one of the few smart home products where you have multiple in every room of your house, right? So you have to choose the settings of each of these products. And the way we really try and tackle making that easier for people is to have fewer steps towards getting the value, right? So when you buy a Philips Hue product, you say which room it's in, and then based on the room type, we automatically create some scenes, some settings for the different lights that we know work well in that kind of space that you can immediately start using. And so in that way, you can get to the point where you're controlling your lights super easily. And we've gone even further. And if you buy some of our accessories, take, for example, a motion sensor that we sell, as soon as you set that up and say which room it's in, it will automatically have a smart default where it gives you the right lighting for the different time of day. So if you put it in a bathroom, then it will have a night light setting at night and a blue energizing light in the morning and a relaxing setting in the evening. And none of that you have to set up. So we really try and do that through smart defaults to remove the number of steps. And then, of course, if you want to personalize it and do exactly what you want, you have all of those knobs to turn as well. But smart defaults is the way to do it.
Got it. All right. So let's talk about your work with partners, because the first thing I think most people do when they bring home the Philips Hue light bulbs. Actually, you probably know what they do. What is the first thing they do when they bring these home, screw them in, and download the app? After that, what do they do?
Yeah, so the first thing they really do is they play around with it. They try different colors. They create some custom scenes. And then probably the second thing they do is they set up other products within the ecosystem. So that might be button switches, sensors, but oftentimes it's also a voice speaker where they want to be able to turn on and off the lights, recall their scenes via Alexa, Google, or Siri. And so that's all been a big part of the Philips Hue ecosystem and our strategy since the beginning. And we were launch partners of all the major voice platforms and have partnerships with a large majority of smart home companies. People find it really compelling to control their light with their voice in particular. So a lot of people start their journey with Alexa, turn off my lights.
Congratulations. You just turned off everybody's lights who is listening to the show.
Sorry. You call them Madam A, right?
We do.
Madam A, turn off my lights.
They'll forgive you. All right. So that's exactly what I was hoping you would say. A lot of those companies, Apple, Samsung, Google, Amazon, they're all working together on we'll call it a standard called Project Connected Home over IP. And the idea here they're touting is interoperability for the smart home. And I'm really curious, as someone y'all have worked really hard to be interoperable with all of these. How do you view that effort? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so we're pretty excited about Project Chip, and we've been working as part of it since very early in its development, and we're on the board of directors of Zigbee, which is hosting the project. So we're actively involved in its development. For us, the reason we are excited about it is it allows us to, let's say, focus and consolidate how we build these integrations. Right. So today, we have to separately develop and extend and add new features together with the partner to all of the separate ecosystems. And what we hope Project Chip will let us do is it will let us push one thing forward, enabling new things for lighting that will work across all of the different products and touch points which a consumer might want to use. And in doing that, it will make our lives easier, will let us bring more features more easily to the market, but will also make the lives of consumers a lot easier because they will know that everything that supports Chip will work with each other. And while for many products like Philips Hue, we have all of these integrations, it can be confusing if you're looking to mix and match things from different places to know what works with what. And that should make it a lot easier for consumers. So we're pretty excited about what it will do.
I am excited about what it will do too. So as someone who's working with Chip, I know that last December when they launched it, there was the idea that a certification would be out sometime later during 2020. Do you have a sense of, is this actually coming out? Are you building it into products today? Is it going to be easy to build it into products?
Yeah, so, in the end, Project Chip has very ambitious goals, right? So, it is trying to create a single unifying kind of application layer standard for how products talk with each other. And that's a big, complicated goal where lots of companies, have opinions and want to contribute towards. I think, given the size of the goal there, the progress has been very good. But I think it will take some time still until we really see products out there. So I think the first products that support it will come in 2021. We are hopeful that we will be able to support it via our hub on the existing hub, so that consumers will be able to get this as a software upgrade for our products. Although a lot of parts of it are still being defined, it is going well. And I think it's amazing to see how all these different companies that are often competing in the market are really teaming up to work together to make this project a success.
Me too. I am excited. And my fingers are crossed as someone who has so many ecosystems just fighting constantly in her home. So you mentioned your hub. So let's talk about this because I'm not even going to say recently. It was about 2 years ago that y'all announced that your version 1 hub, which was launched in 2012, y'all said that it would die. And now it has since died. So let's talk about how you approached the end of life for the version 1 hub. And you should probably tell people why too, because I don't think a lot of people understand all that goes into building a smart lighting infrastructure.
Yeah, so we announced the end of support for the version 1 hub, indeed, almost 2 years ago, and we finally disabled its cloud connection a few months ago now in June. We did that because I think the industry has moved on, and we need to support different security technologies and techniques which that hardware couldn't support. So we actually felt it's not responsible to keep this connected to the internet when it's not able to use the latest technologies. Now, we haven't completely killed it. All we've done is we've disabled the cloud connection for it. So consumers who have this hub can continue to use it within the home as a local-only product, so still controlling it with their smartphones. But yeah, anything that needs the cloud connection no longer works. We supported this product after the new version of it launched for 5 years, giving it features all the way up until 2018, and then just security patches the last 2 years. And we tried our best to be transparent about what we were doing and why we were doing it, and also to be transparent for our current products as well. In the end, it's the reality of these internet-connected software products that they have a lifetime. They have a life cycle. They have an expiry date. I think it's very important that manufacturers are upfront about that, and so that's why we have an end of support policy in place now, which says the minimum support lifetime we will have for all of the products we have out there. I think another nice thing that we're able to do and continue to do, and it's a big benefit of actually having a hub-based system, is all of the bulbs that were on those hubs are able to be moved to the new hub. So while this single product has become end of life, the bulbs continue to be relevant and get all of the new features going forward. So if you were an early adopter of Philips Hue who bought the product back in 2012, you can still use those bulbs today with all of the features that came with the V2 hub. And so it enables us to extend the lifespan of these interconnected bulbs by having this hub in between. That lets us do that in a much better way because it can provide the security protections and benefits. We don't have to do it all in the light bulb itself.
And that hub strategy actually was something that a lot of people brought up as like something that would be amazing to have when Sonos, for example, deprecated all of their older products. People were like, it was so expensive. And yet still people were like, I hate buying a new hub. So I do think people just hate buying new things, which makes total sense.
But I think it's a nice analogy for what Sonos had to do, right? So they have all the products directly interconnected themselves. And so when that hardware or firmware they had to end support, all the products went out. Right? While with us, it's just a single product and everything connected to it can be brought forward, can be future-proofed via the hub.
Right. And I think that's the way to go. I think people just get frustrated when they have to, spend more money or mess with the system. And I will say that I, as someone who has had Philips Hue stuff, a lot of it, since 2012, those 2012 original bulbs, they do not play nicely. They do not get added well to the V2 hub. Just throwing that out there. I had to actually manually force them to go on. So that was not as much fun. Not everyone may have that experience, but I did. Okay. So let's talk about what you learned from this, because I think y'all did a great job. I think y'all did a great job giving people plenty of notice. I also have a question about the bulbs, because in the terms of service, y'all say, hey, we're going to support everything for a minimum of, I believe it's 5 years after you purchase or after we've launched it. I can't remember if it's purchase or launch.
Yeah. So what we say for the bulbs is that we will support it for a minimum of 5 years after purchase. And for bridges, we say 1 year. Right. So 1 year after we replace the next generation, it may stop getting features. So we have a different policy for bulbs and bridges.
Got it. Okay. And right now, is there a version 3 bridge out there?
Nope. We're still on version 2. It's still going strong. We're still adding features.
Okay. So the clock is not ticking on my V2 hub, everybody. Yay. Moving right along to exciting new things. And I'll bring this up because Kevin Toffel, my colleague on the podcast, loves this stuff. Let's talk about your entertainment efforts, because I think the last time we talked was at CES after y'all did I think it was like 12 Monkeys. It was something with the Sci-Fi Channel, and you synced the bulbs to the television content. And I was like, this is awesome. And 5 years later, we're actually seeing this. So why focus on entertainment?
It's been quite a journey, entertainment with Philips Hue. We've tried a lot of things, and we're pretty happy with where we are now. I think what we're really trying to do is we really think that lighting can be a important ingredient in how you consume video or any entertainment content inside your home. We have surround sound. Why don't we have surround lighting to make it feel like you are in the screen rather than just looking at something? So we think that is a huge potential. You know, I always say I don't understand why surround sound is so big and why this cannot be just as big, because the level of immersion you can get if you experience this is extremely high. You really feel like you are in the action. And so we've been working on this for a while. The first things we did were indeed with the Sci-Fi Channel, and we did 12 Monkeys. Actually, the first thing we did was the Sharknado movies.
Oh, I loved that. It was my favorite.
So we had a great time with their directors choosing the exact right shade of red to paint the walls when someone's head was bitten off by a shark. And we did a few movies and TV series with the Sci-Fi Channel. But the issue was it was very difficult to scale, right? If you're going to invest in lighting for entertainment, you want it to work with everything you watch on TV, every game you play. We moved on and we built a piece of software that runs on PCs and Macs that analyzes the screen content. Right, so it listens to the audio and the screen drivers, and based on that, it analyzes it, interprets the image, gets 3D information from it, and then renders it into the room. And so we launched that back in 2018 as a PC app, and people started using it and being really excited about it, mainly for PC gaming. Because it's running on a PC. But we also had lots of people that were so enthusiastic, they started wiring HDMI cables from their laptop to the TV to get this surround lighting experience. But we wanted to make it something that you could really enjoy in your living room. So last year, we launched the Hdmi Sync Box, which is a small box that you plug into any HDMI video source, be it a PlayStation or an Apple TV. Or your set-top box, and then it will live on the fly decrypt the HDCP video stream, extract the 3D information, and then stream it out to the lights inside the room in lip-sync quality synchronization to what's happening on the screen. And with that, it can really be like surround sound and an install and forget experience where you just press play and then the lights are immersing you in that content. So we're pretty happy with what we're seeing people do with it now and how easy we've managed to get it.
It is easy. And Kevin, I gave it to him last year for Christmas, and he freaking loves it. I'm almost sold on it. Okay. And I feel like we're almost out of time. So I want to ask you, because it's very rare at this day and age, it feels like, of the smart home to get people who actually created the products that we're talking about to talk to us about how they've grown. But you were one of the creators of Philips Hue. And when you started thinking about this, I want to know if you could imagine where it's ended up or how this smart home evolved. I'm very curious about your historical perspective here.
Yeah, so I think when we started, I think we had big ambitions to change how the world uses lighting inside their homes. And I think we're on that journey. But I think there's a lot of things that we didn't predict. I think the amount of time we spent speaking to our lights was something that surprised us how fast that went, how big a part of the smart home ecosystem that has become. That was a big surprise, but the fact that people are using colorful lights, even the entertainment use cases, are something that we dreamed up at the beginning. So I'm pretty happy with how it's turned out and how we're seeing people using lights in creative ways, sometimes that we didn't even imagine. I think that's very rewarding. And I think the other thing that I find really rewarding about being a creator of one of these products is when you start seeing it kind of live a life of its own, where you have an ecosystem of other companies and other people building on top of your platforms to get it to do things you hadn't imagined. I hadn't imagined that we would have an app to give ringtones to deaf people when we created the product, but somebody else out there saw that opportunity and built it. And I think that's the most rewarding, when it lives its own life and it grows by itself.
And what would you add? What are you looking forward to?
I think there's so much potential that we're only scratching the surface of yet, with recommending people how the lights behave automatically based on their usage. So using AI and machine learning techniques to more easily help people automate their lights so they don't have to interact with it as much. It just does the right thing to support what you're doing. I think there we're just scratching the surface, but I see enormous potential in what can be done there. That, to me, is the most exciting. It will help people get more out of their lights with less effort.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, George, so much for coming on the show this week. And, thanks for thinking up Philips Hue. It's one of my classic all-time favorite products.
Thank you. Happy to speak to you.
That's it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, if you'd like more IoT news, sign up for my newsletter at stacyoniot.com. We'll see you next week.